In a separate section, we talked about Photoshop's print dialog. And
speaking of print,
we're printing in the background. This video is about printing and screen. So we've covered separately the Photoshop print setup. And what I think would be useful is to kind of drill down and give a in-depth look at the print setup in Lightroom.
Now, just before I do, I should mention, but nice shirt.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, you
nice sweater. From Madagascar?
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't buy it in Madagascar.
No.
But anyhow, I washed it the other day and I saw the label. It said made in Madagascar. I was surprised. So we're not going to do a total overview of Lightroom, just printing, because of course we have a separate multi-hour tutorial on Lightroom, which we hope you'll buy if you haven't already. So the place to start, and get my glasses on, the place to start is going from, I happen to be here in the library module. Here's a shot of wonderful, wonderful church in San Miguel. And let's go to the print module. And the right-hand column, as is the case in Lightroom, is now all of the settings that are possible for printing. But there are some things over here that are really important. And these are things that you typically only set once for a particular printer and a particular paper and a particular size. So let's run through that. And the first of them is page setup.
And one of the things that I'll point out is in the Windows version, there's only one button because it's combined in print properties.
Okay. So first thing we want to do is select our printer, and we're going to print to the new R3000 Epson, which is chugging away in the background, printing some examples. And then we're going to choose paper size, and I'm printing on 13 by 19, so select that, and I'll hit OK.
And it is important that you specify the printer, not just any printer.
Right.
Page setup will allow you to do that, and that's a problem.
Okay, print settings is next. And once again, I have to say, go to the R3000. Then the most important one is printer settings. And in printer settings, I only want one copy. Collated is irrelevant. And I have to choose the paper type. I'm not sure what the recommendation is for Canson. I think it's luster.
I think it's luster.
I think it's luster as well.
And setting that is the media type that really doesn't have anything to do with the profile. The media type
Thickness
sets
of the
up
paper.
the platen gap, the thickness of the paper, and in essence tells the print head what kind of dot gain, what kind of ink load to lay down.
Exactly. Print mode, same as when we discussed it in Photoshop, AccuPhoto HD, which means, HD2, right? Color.
New and improved.
Yeah, right, color. Yeah. Or advanced black and white, which is black and white. So we're going to print in color. And
probably don't
color.
want Epson standard sRGB, do you?
No, I don't.
No. This is one of the gotchas.
It's a gotcha, isn't it?
And back out of that, so hit cancel.
Cancel.
And you'll want to go over to the right side. Currently, what ends up happening is that the color sync pipeline likes to be a dictator. You either use manage by printer or you use manage by application. And in this case, you actually need to set
this first
before you can actually, because
it's worth mentioning this. When you're printing, you're dealing with the operating system, the color sync, the printer driver, the application, in this case Lightroom, the profile. There are lots of cooks in the kitchen.
Yes.
And they all have to work together efficiently.
And if you're not careful, all of them will put the cayenne pepper into the chili, and the end result is you can't stand it.
Okay. So we've done this little digression. We need to have over here, under the color management tab, we need to have chosen a profile.
Yes.
This will make sense when we come back to it. So now let me go to printer settings. And now...
You can't change it here.
Right, because it is being managed by a profile.
So reset the luster.
Thank you. Because I'm printing on Canson Barita Photographique, which is my current favorite paper.
Photographique.
Photographique, you say it en français. And then we choose, on this particular printer, 1440 Superfine, 1440 Photo, and then there's Superphoto 5760 DPI, which I haven't seen before. Has this been anywhere before?
A few of the consumer printers have had it. Basically, the photo resolution is kind of the normal resolution for printing, and the Superphoto is really an enhanced version of the stepper motor alignment. That's how Epson actually does the different resolutions. So in this case, what we're finding, and we will cover separately, the fact that this printer is capable of an incredibly sharp detail. So go ahead and use the 5760.
Yeah, well, as you say, the experiments that I've been doing the last little while with this new printer show you can see it. There is a visible difference. Okay, and high speed, as we've mentioned before, is simply bidirectional versus unidirectional. And
as long as you've done the auto head alignment, it's fine.
Yeah. So there's no reason not to use high speed.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it'll print slower.
Yeah.
Which can be an advantage.
In situations where you're printing heavy ink on paper that takes a longer time to dry between passes, then you can print unidirectional instead of bi.
Okay.
So, and then it's important to note here that it's save, not print. So it's actually saving the setting,
right?
And you can actually
and
bypass.
It's saving it into a preset called standard.
Well, here's one of the things about Lightroom and the Mac print driver. The Mac print driver allows you to select and create different presets.
Right, which you can say do a save as.
Yes,
right.
But with the scheme that Lightroom uses, it's suggested not to actually have a print driver save setting, but to save all of this and then incorporate
and do it
that
in a template.
In a template.
And we'll show that. Okay, so at this point, I'm simply going to hit save. I'm not going to do a named save.
Correct.
Because we have lots of other things that we're going to set up. And although this may seem at the moment like, my God, there's so many things I have to set up. Once you've done this once for a printer, a paper, a print size, that's it.
Then you save the template and you can call it back at any time.
Exactly, because if I click on R3000 Canson BP 5700 PPI, everything that I'm doing now, including margins and profile, everything are there. And I can go click, print one, and that's it. So don't be intimidated by this. You only have to do it once. And you're going to screw up, and you're going to do it more than once. But nevertheless, this is, okay, we've done page setup and print settings. So now we know which printer, which paper, which resolution. So working our way down the menus on the right-hand side.
And we're just going to concentrate on the single image. Lightroom has some RIP-like functionality for picture package, which is multiple copies of the same image, and custom package, which is kind of a light-duty page layout where you can put multiple images up.
And I would also point out that those are covered in much more detail in our Lightroom tutorial.
Yeah.
And if that sounds like a sales pitch, it is. Next section, image settings.
Yes.
Zoom to fill, rotate to fit, repeat one photo per page. The one I want to talk about is rotate to fit. And you asked me to find
A horizontal. Yeah.
a horizontal so I could demonstrate this.
Because I got to tell you, I don't know how many times in Photoshop I've accidentally printed a horizontal image on a portrait-oriented page. Just, you know.
Yeah, there goes $5-6.
Yeah. And, you know, Photoshop can't be smart enough to do that automatically. Give me a break.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
rotate to fit.
Rotate to fit.
That's a good reason to use Lightroom for printing right there.
Right. So now we want to go down to the next tab area, which is layout. And this is where you set margins. There's a default of 0.13 inches, or you can go into preferences and set it metric.
Yeah.
But
The printer itself has built-in hard margins, unless you're printing borderless, which then it goes beyond the edge of the paper.
sprays ink out into your paper, into your printer.
But I'm a big believer in making sure that you've got at least a 1-inch margin, and sometimes more if it's a bigger sheet of paper.
Right.
So that basically you've got paper that you can handle without getting your finger on what is going to be inked or what is already inked.
My standard is 1 inch, and regardless from printing 8x10s, A4s, all the way up to Super A3B, even on the roll paper, large prints. Again, there it's going to be under a mat, and so you're not going to see the border, but at least it gives you a little bit of handling room. But the other thing is, a lot of people, when I look at people's prints, they print with this 0.13, where it's like teeny, it just doesn't look good. If you put the image in a lot of white space, it kind of floats, and the presentation is more pleasant.
Yeah, it's actually kind of like matting.
Yeah, exactly. So, going to type 1. Maybe let's elaborate a little on this issue of printing borderless. Some people like to print borderless, which is the kind of prints you get from the drugstore. I don't know why. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The downside is that the printer can't stop exactly at the edge of the paper, and so it's spraying ink onto the inside of your printer,
Yes.
which is not a good thing.
And the other thing that it has to do is it has to slightly alter the size to make sure that the image bleeds over, so you don't know exactly where the hard cut will be. I find that to be incredibly imprecise.
It is imprecise. So my suggestion is go with the default minimal border, get yourself a trimmer, and trim the prints. And if you're making 4x5, 5x7, handout snapshot print, go to the drugstore. It just doesn't make sense. The idea of overspraying inside the printer, even though I know that they have an area where the ink is collected, just not my idea of a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So because people want it, the manufacturers give it to you, but it doesn't mean you should use it.
Yeah. Just because it's there doesn't mean you should.
Okay, so I've typed in 1 inch, and now I'm simply going to hit tab 1, tab 1, tab 1, tab. And what you see is this is a WYSIWYG page layout. What you see is what you get. And as you said, it's very much like a RIP. And so you have interactive page layout. Now, again, because this is very much like a RIP, we have page grid. And if I wanted to print more than 1 image to a page, I can do that. So here I could print 2x3. Oh, it's very cool. Anyhow, I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to print 1 image.
Because you're a fine artist.
I am a fine artist. Next item, cell size, height and width. You can type in individual numbers.
If you were actually printing to fit into an existing cut mat, then you could actually custom size it, although you'd have to have the crop already correct.
You'd have to have your aspect ratio exactly the same as the aspect ratio of your mat. But let's say for some reason I wanted this to be exactly 15 inches in height.
Yes.
Now it's exactly 15 and the width has gone to 10.95.
Yes.
Or if you want to, and remember over here we set up our page size. So if I go over here to page setup, this is on 1319 paper. If I just simply drag these all the way over to the right, this is now 10.95 inches by 17.01 inches on...
Really?
Yeah, okay. Because I've now got a 1 inch border. Next is show guides. And as you can see, some are there, some are not. I have no problem in having them on because it helps me visualize what's going to go on. But there's one here that is really worth mentioning, and that's turning on dimension. Because what that does is up here in the upper left of the image, it shows you the same information that you have over here. How big is the print going to be? But it tells you the actual number of pixels per inch that at this size it's going to be. So let me just illustrate this. If I change the size, so at this size it's going to be 293 ppi, and rotate to fit is active, so it's changing it. But at this size it's going to be 206 ppi. We're going to see why that's important to know that in a moment. Under page, there's a whole bunch of stuff which we're not going to go into here because it has things like overlaying text and watermarking, and that's not really part of this tutorial. And then we get to print job. Now, we can print to the printer, or we can print to a JPEG file.
Yes, which is useful if you're sending out formatted prints to a photo lab.
As we discussed when we were talking about the Photoshop printing, what you want to do is you want to use a profile that you get from the lab and have it embedded, so to speak, so that the JPEG then is just ready to print with their profile. So we're going to print to printer. Let's mention draft mode printing.
Basically what it is just a way of pushing out quickly a rough. It uses the preview if you have a preview size large enough instead of actually rasterizing the full raw image. So
yeah, because Lightroom,
it's a quick print.
Yeah, Lightroom, in addition to always working off your raw file and never touching it, just reading it, creates a library, if you will, of previews so that you can, work quickly. But, for example, if it hasn't already built a preview of one-to-one, when you click on one-to-one and you want to blow the thing up, it then takes, depending on how quick your computer is and how big your file is, it can take a few seconds to generate full-size preview. But if you've got the full-size preview and you've got your preferences set to keep the previews, then draft mode printing can mean you can churn out prints pretty quickly.
Particularly useful if you want to generate contact sheets for a PDF, because the draft mode, it's a throwaway purpose, and it can go through and create a PDF contact sheet of multiple images just immediately.
Right. Now we get to an important one, print resolution. And this brings us back to up here where it's telling us that this particular file is going to print in this roughly 11 by 16 print size at 206 ppi. So let's digress for a second now.
A couple of schools of thought. Bruce Fraser used to say, well, as long as the native resolution of the image at the print dimensions was between 180 and 480 pixels per inch.
In this case, it's 206.
Yeah, which is above the threshold. Don't bother to resample. And that was true.
That was then and this is now?
Yes. Well, what has happened is things keep changing. The print head nozzles on the 7900, for example, are 360 nozzles per inch. Back before, initially, they were 180. And therefore, the thought was that if you couldn't see any difference, don't worry about going over 180. The problem with that is that the resolving capability of the printers has improved, and now Lightroom actually has a somewhat unique, Lightroom and Camera Raw has a somewhat unique resampling algorithm in that in Photoshop you resample either using bicubic sharper for downsampling or bicubic smoother for upsampling. It's an either-or situation. Lightroom has the ability to do adaptive bicubic. So if you're going to go upsample a little bit, then it does it primarily bicubic, and if you are doing a big upsample, it does bicubic smoother automatically. So now the question is it worth resampling up? And what I found in my testing is if you're on the lower half of the 180 to 480, increasing the resolution by about 50% would be useful. So in this case, 206, I would suggest going up to 300 or up to 360, which would be an even.
So in other words, if this was more in the 250 range, you'd go to 360.
Yeah.
Here at 206,
adding
go to
50%.
300. Yeah. So 50%. So now I think this is important because in many ways you're today the sharpening guru. Your code is in here. You've worked with Bruce, who was the authority for many years on the subject, and I think the people just have to test this stuff themselves if they don't believe you.
I've spent a lot of time on it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, right. So no, I trust your opinion here. So bottom line, you can res up in Lightroom 50%.
If you're on the low end of the 180 to 480.
Right.
And if you're on the high end, if you're above 300 or around 300, then you really want to contemplate going up to 720. And what that does is there's a thing called the Nyquist theorem which is actually based on audio, but it says whatever your final kind of resolvability is, you actually want to be working at twice that, so that basically then you're down to the normal level of like 360
You're not
nozzles per
skating
inch.
right at the edge.
Yes.
You've got a buffer, if you will.
It's
a
also
simplified way of
one of the
describing
reasons that you want to edit in ProPhoto instead of Adobe RGB. So, and this really came about, Lightroom 2 had a maximum resolution of 480. In Lightroom 3, now you can go up to 720. And it happened because we got these darn 60 megapixel backs.
Right.
And I was making prints that had to be downsampled to print. And I'm saying, oh, I paid for all this resolution. I want to keep it in the print. So doing tests with Kevin T. Scudder and Eric Chan, we proved that printing out high resolution images at either high native or upsampling to 720 is very important. And we'll have a separate demo of the difference between native and 720.
And in fact, when we do that, we printed out one of my shots that I did when I was testing the Phase 1 IQ 180 back, which is an 80 megapixel back. And that printed out in a large size at about 700 ppi. And what you can get when you have an ultra high resolution file and you print it on one of these new generation printers is pretty amazing.
So one point that is based upon the Epson piezo print heads for HP and Canon that uses a bubble jet technology. Their effective resolution is 600. So same rule applies. If you're above 300, upsample to 600 for the maximum quality. And again, test it yourself. I've seen the results. I know that it works.
But just a small digression on our digression, because we are going to get back to this in a moment. But for many, many years, there was this common wisdom of if you want to upsample a file, you should do it in 10% increments. That's old news, isn't it?
Step interpolation, that actually, Fred Miranda came up with that prior to the incorporation of bicubic smoother and sharper. It actually led to research regarding improving the bicubic algorithm. And the bicubic is just basically bi, meaning looking two directions, cubic in four squares. So it's a interpolation method of resampling. It's kind of somewhat similar to like demosaicing, where you basically create something out of nothing, but based upon edge information and textural information. So yeah, and then there's another old wives' tale that you should set the resolution to be an equally divisible number to the printer resolution. No. Surely you don't want to downsample. So if you're at 310, you wouldn't want to downsample to 300.
Right.
Conversely, upsampling just a little bit doesn't make any sense either. So if you're on the low end of the resolution, adding 50% will help the image. If you're in the middle or above with certain kind of high frequency textural information or strong high contrast diagonals or circles where you kind of sometimes see chattering along the edges, upsampling to 600 for HP and Canon and upsampling to 720 for Epson, the results, it really does work.
Worthwhile, yeah.
So set it to 300.
Okay, print resolution, type in a number, 300.
Good.
Now, print sharpening. We have a choice of low, standard, and high, and we have a choice of matte or glossy. So there are 6 combinations of sharpening levels depending on the paper you're using and the nature of the image, and there are a lot of variables. This is one of those things that I always use standard. I never use the others, but there are good reasons.
Yeah,
one might.
Here's the thing. Quite honestly, the standard is designed to work optimally if you've optimally capture sharpened your image in the develop module. If you're at default, if you haven't increased or optimized your sharpening, then quite honestly, standard is probably going to be an undersharpen, because it's part of a workflow concept based upon PhotoKit Sharpener, the work that Bruce did.
Input sharpening and output sharpening. And creative
with creative in the middle with the local adjustment brush. So this is dependent upon having done an optimal capture sharpening in the develop module. Okay. So yeah.
At the bottom of this section is 16-bit output. Mm-hmm. Again, that should be turned on if you have a Mac.
Yeah, if you've got 16-bit
files,
the print pipeline and the print driver will allow it. I've not noticed that it makes any difference in the speed of the print spooling. So if you're on Windows, you don't have that option. Mm-hmm. The advantage is that Adobe Ace, which is also at the root of Lightroom's print processing, as well as Photoshop, Adobe Ace will do the color transform from the working space to the output profile in 20-bit precision accuracy, even though it's only sending 8-bit in the pipeline. So you have to work real hard to be able to see the difference. I've seen the difference, but if you got 16-bit, use it.
Okay, fair enough. Way back at the beginning, what we talked about was having color management properly set, and not, well, it can be managed by printer, but
if you've got a small kind of consumer printer that doesn't have an ability to turn off the color management, then yes.
But with the kind of work that we're doing, we want to have a profile. And the profiles, as we've discussed in a separate section, you can download them from the paper manufacturer's website, or you can have a third party, someone like our friend Eric Chan, or
Andrew
Rodney, Digital Dog.
Or
Chromex. There are lots of people online who will do that. And there, what you do is you download a target file. You print it out with no color management. You then physically mail it to them, postal mail. Okay, we don't have teleportation yet. They then use a scanning device, possibly an I/O, and then they email the profile to you, and that costs somewhere in the $100 range.
$50 to $100.
$50 to $100. Or the third alternative, as we've seen, is make your own profiles, which means making an investment in the tools, but then you can profile any paper at any time that you like. But it's a little bit of work.
So how did you get that profile to show up there?
I clicked on Other. And up come all of the profiles that are on this computer. And you notice the ones that I've checkmarked then show up.
Yeah. Just do me a favor and scroll up just a little bit. This is a pet peeve of mine. Somebody in marketing decided to name these profiles. You can't see the profile name. You have to, basically, you've got to drag this thing way over. So what this does is it shows you the profile name here and the actual physical location. In some cases, profiles can be either in the color sync profile in the root level, they can be in the color sync profiles in the user level, if they're user level permissions, and then they can also be tucked inside of the actual print driver so that you can't find them. So it's...
And they can have different names, because the internal name and the file name can be different as well.
Yeah, they shouldn't be, though.
I've seen them.
Yeah, okay.
And you have too. Okay. So anyhow,
if you change the file name to something other than that on the hard drive, then there is a disconnect between the file name and the actual profile name.
Well, and also over here, for example, this is Nikon Adobe RGB. The actual file name is nkadobe.icm. Okay. So
thanks, Nikon.
Yeah. Click on the ones you want, and then now with color management set this way, not managed by printer, we can choose the appropriate profile. Then we come to rendering intent, either relative or perceptual, and we won't go there again. We have a separate whole discussion on rendering intent and soft proofing and all of that, so we don't repeat it. Now,
you tend to default to relative.
I default to relative if I'm feeling lazy. I also find maybe 60%, 70% of the time relative is a better choice. But if I'm not sure, then I'll do a quick export into Photoshop. I'll do a soft proof, see which one's better, and then come back and set it appropriately. And hopefully, maybe by the time we get to Lightroom 4, we'll have soft proofing. Please, Adobe. So now, this is it.
You've got all the things set.
Right. Now I want to create, and this has been a lot of work, a lot of decisions. Now I want to create a template. I go over here and I create a template. And I'm going to, just for fun, going to call it Fred. I could call it, as I have here, I already have one called 7900 Canson FP. Fred is totally non-communicative, but just as an example, I don't want to confuse it with what I already have.
I would say Fred 3000.
Fred 3000. You happy?
Well, at least it has the number designation of the printer in there.
So now, in this list, I have Fred 3000. So let's say I've been printing to another printer, doing something else, using a different kind of paper, printing a different size. And let's say I've been on my 7900, printing velvet fine art. Notice everything changes.
And click on the 3880.
And I click on the 3880. And now I click on Fred 3000.
And you're back.
And I'm here. And all the settings that we just went through. So this is incredibly powerful. Now, one of the things that if you change, so for example,
if you uncheck print resolution.
I was going to do that.
Okay. So if you
You're jumping ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sit quietly. Now, the Fred 3000 has a resolution of 300. If I turn this off, and for some reason I wanted to print at the native resolution, I could now go here, click on Control, and do Update with current settings. Now Fred 3000 is native resolution. But what I can also do is go back here, turn it on, create a new profile called Fred 3000 300 ppi. And now, so in other words, you can have as many of these as you like. Big scrolling list.
And when I print from Lightroom, you'll see that I've got templates, multiple templates for, well, your 7900. I've got a 9900. I've got 9900, 3880. I don't have any R3000 yet, but just you invest the time.
Yeah, we have a Canon printer here that we're going to be demonstrating.
So I think it's important to invest the time, and then you can be consistent in terms of the print sizes. The other thing that I'll point out is go ahead and just click on your bugs collection.
Oh, by the way, bugs don't mean bugs.
Yeah.
These are Volkswagen bugs on the streets of San Miguel. This is my San Miguel portfolio.
Okay, so
okay,
go back to the print. Now select them all. And one of the things you'll see over here, and then
page
select
1 of 7.
Select
Fred.
Fred. Yeah.
Okay.
So page 1 of 7. Here's the thing: the ability to spit out properly formatted and margined prints in Lightroom. This is where it really excels over Photoshop, because all you'd have to do is literally click the print one button and then make sure you got paper in the printer.
And 7 prints will come out, and they'll be properly rotated.
Correct.
And they'll have all the appropriate settings.
Conversely, to do that in Photoshop, you'd have to open up each one of those images, properly set up the settings, and hit print 7 times.
Huge time saver, huge error saver, and really a lot of functionality that up until now you needed an expensive rip to be able to emulate.
Yeah.
So that's really it about printing from Lightroom.
Okay.